Morning again. We're going to continue in our study in James this morning, but before we do that, I just want to talk about something that's been sort of big in the news and social media lately. I want to talk a little bit about sexual assault, just because recent events have brought that concept up into popular conversation. So I want to give you some facts so that you can be informed, so that we can talk about it, so that we can be a safe place. So I'm going to start with this fact. If you didn't know this, 1 out of every 6 American women has been the victim of an attempted or completed rape in her lifetime. It's about 20%. 1 out of every 6. So statistically speaking, in this room, there have been several people who have been the victim of an attempted or completed rape. That's a pretty high percentage. Out of all of those rapes, here's what we know. Out of every 1,000 rapes, 994 perpetrators will walk free. Don't know if you knew that or not. 994 perpetrators out of every 1,000 rapes will walk free. Here's why. Only 310 out of every 1,000, only 310 rapes are ever reported to the police. We're going to talk about why in a little bit, but there's a very low report rate in general for rape. Out of those, only 57 reports ever lead to an arrest. Only 57 reports ever lead to an arrest. Only 11 cases ever get referred to prosecutors. Only 7 cases out of every 1,000 will lead to a felony conviction, and only 6 rapists out of every 1,000 rapes will ever see the inside of a jail cell, will ever go to prison. So part of what we see here is there is an extremely low reporting rate for sexual assault as it is. Why is that? Because victims, as we listen to victims of sexual assault, we know that they are often very, very afraid to come forward and report their sexual assault. Often it's a very painful experience, physically as well as emotionally. It's re-traumatizing, and often they are, the rape victims are disbelieved. It's just easier for them to not tell anybody than to go through the traumatic process of reporting that, then only to see out of that only 6 rapists ever see prison. People feel like there's no point to go through the process of reporting. So we're going to talk about that. Now, one of the things that has been popular lately, if you've been watching the news or if you've been on social media, is this idea of, you see a lot of people talking about, well, what about false reports? What about false reports? False reports are dangerous, right? Well, here's another little infographic. You may not be able to see it terribly well from where you're sitting. This image represents 1,000 rapes. Those 2 little black guys down there at the bottom, this is not intended to represent race, by the way, it's just color. But the 2 little dark fellas there at the bottom represent, out of 1,000 rapes, how many false reports there will ever be. In other words, false reports are extremely, extremely, extremely uncommon. We know, based on statistics, that 92 to 98% of all sexual assault reports are true. This is statistically true. Now, this doesn't mean, right? This doesn't mean that, just because a report is true that we forego due process. It doesn't mean that we don't investigate it. It just means that if somebody comes forward and says that they've been sexually assaulted, there's a 92 to 98% chance that they're telling the truth. Now, to put this in perspective, if I tell you that there's a 92 to 98% chance that if you go to the restaurant on the corner, you're going to get food poisoning, are you going to risk it? Probably not. Okay, so this is why experts in the field of sexual assault, those who deal with victims on a regular basis, those who research this professionally, they tell us that we should start by believing. Start by believing. Here's the website, startbybelieving.org. It has some really good information on there about how we should respond when somebody tells us that they have been the victim of sexual assault. Now, again, this doesn't mean that we forego due process in the criminal court system. Right? This doesn't mean that if somebody comes through and says something that's automatically enough evidence to throw somebody in prison. It just means that if somebody comes forward, if they have enough courage to come forward and actually report that they've been sexually assaulted, there's a 92 to 98% chance they're telling the truth. We should start by believing them and giving them the resources that they need to start to heal and to take the allegation seriously and give it a full, thorough investigation. The reason I'm talking about this is because there's been a lot I'm not addressing the current political thing as politics. I'm talking about just sexual assault in general and how we talk about it because it's important. Here's why. I'm going to read to you, with permission, part of a message I received from a sexual assault victim privately during some conversations I'd been having online about this. Here's what she said. She said, "Thank you so much for speaking up for women that have faced sexual abuse. It has been saddening and disheartening seeing the responses you have been getting for it. And it's not just men that are defending these sexual predators. The responses I have seen to your posts are exactly why we don't speak up about what we have been through. It's as if people don't realize that they are helping to continue to perpetuate the cycle of abuse that is pervasive in our society. Honestly," she writes, "the responses I've seen make me not want to associate myself with Christianity at all, as it seems to be hardwired into the modern church to protect the abusers and silence the victims." Now, as a pastor and as a Christian, this breaks my heart and it terrifies me. That the fact that the place that should be the safest place in the world for somebody to come forward and admit something and find love and support is where victims of abuse are finding themselves attacked and disbelieved and all of that. So I say this to say that the way that we talk about this, whatever you believe about the political situation, the way that we talk about this has a real detrimental effect or healing effect on victims of sexual assault, which is, as we've seen, a massive, massive problem in our society. So we want to start by believing. Again, this doesn't mean that we automatically just assume that somebody is guilty if we believe somebody who says that they've been assaulted. We can both believe the victim as well as follow through with due process in the court of law. These concepts are not mutually exclusive. But if the first thing that we talk about, if we start to attack people who come out with reports and question their credibility and all of that, what we're telling women, and this is what we're hearing from women, lots of women, is that this keeps them from ever reporting because the process is already painful enough, and when we don't believe them, it just makes them suffer in silence. And as a church, we should never be okay with people suffering in silence. We ought to be the safest place in the world for people who have been hurt, who have been abused, to come and open up and find acceptance and find healing